locked in a creche. That's the claim made by the Liberal Democrat Senator David Leyonhjelm. Now, North Sydney Council, they've come into question. Rates are set to rise by up to 40% over the next 5 years in what the Senator describes as jacking up rates to inordinate levels in order to pay for the rules and the regulations they impose, and they treat us like children. Hard to argue with much of that. Senator Leyonhjelm is on the line. Senator, Happy New Year. Hope you're well.
Good afternoon, Luke.
Thanks so much for your time. So, North Sydney in particular, an $80,000 campaign against local businesses using plastic bags, a blanket ban on cigarette smoking throughout the North Sydney CBD by the beginning of next year, which is expected to be extended to e-cigarettes. They do, don't they, some councils or councillors like to have a presence in every aspect of our lives?
They do, and in many cases they're frustrated, either bureaucrats or frustrated state or federal politicians, and they find the being on a council just a bit limiting, rubbish rates and roads is just not enough for them to worry about. So they've got to go and try and solve all the problems of the world, or the ones that they think are problems anyway. And it's the ones that I wrote about in that article in the Telegraph today. It's just the tip of the iceberg. I get letters from local government all the time telling me this is the council's opinion. And, mostly I just ignore them, but I have to say I am often tempted to write back and say, what on earth do you think you're doing, having an opinion or a policy on this and writing to me? What difference does it make? That's not your job. Your job is to look after your local residents. And then when they do get involved in stuff for their local residents, there's such nanny status. They want to tell them how to live their lives. The assumption is that getting elected to a council turns you into a wise person, so wise, in fact, you can tell other people what's good for them.
It's almost like it's a graduation process, isn't it? Right? You go through local council and see what you can get going there. Then you might get a position in state government, or you might then get the next step up to the federal government. Don't you think it's almost like right? This is where you audition. It's like new faces for lunatics.
Yes, that's right. So councils and student politics are the sort of the breeding ground for these people who think they can run the show. And the problem, of course, with many of them is they couldn't run a chook raffle, and they certainly don't have very or any credentials as far as running their own lives are concerned. Many of them have hopelessly tragic lives, but they still think they can tell us where we can smoke and where we can't smoke, more particular, where we can vape, how we can ride our bicycles, where we can ride our bicycles, what's good for us, the whole shooting match. It's an endless list of them all. You know them as well as I do. Yeah. And they're convinced of their own moral virtue, and they're convinced that they've got every right to tell us what's good for us.
Picnicking with a family of 5 or more requires a permit? What?
Well, that's an extra little bit where not only they tell us what's good for us, they say, well, once you reach a certain stage, we have to approve it in advance. So, I mean, they're not going to approve letting off fireworks, for example, but once you get, something less overt and having a serious game of cricket, if you've got 10 relatives, for example, you can't do it. Well, in some councils. Most councils you can, but in City of Sydney you can't. And it's the thin end of the wedge again. What happens in North Sydney or City of Sydney this year will be quite widespread probably within 5 years in other councils.
Yeah, it's a worry. Tell me why you aren't